Well, we're ready to go here. I am in Saint-Aubin with Olivier Lamy, and who's going to present these very special wines of the high density plantings. So, Olivier, this is our friends here in Hong Kong, who are now used to doing their tasting by video. It's good that Hong Kong is becoming open again, and we shall come and see you at some point in the spring, but probably not before then. Olivier, tell us a bit about the domain and how you had the idea of doing the high density planting.
The estate, my father started in 73, and it's a family estate, a very small estate. He started in the garage in Saint-Aubin, the middle of the village, and he worked only with 1 hectare at first. And all his life he planting a new vineyard, because it was when you buy vineyard you have to replant if the vineyard was dead or bad, and in vintage 89, he would like to plant a new vineyard a little bit more close, because there was a different of level and you want to use more vine to produce more. And we see the grapes was different, was smaller, and we don't produce more. You have more work but produce less. And we want to confirm the results in other vineyards, in Clos du Mai, in Centenay, Gravière, to 0.7. It means 14,000 vine per hectare. And still the grape was smaller and better taste for me, better maturation phenolic and better acidity. And in O1, I would like to improve if it was a good way to this 0.7, and I would like to double 0.35. And I say if it's work to 0.7 or 0.35, we can use more for the plantation in this way, because it's more work.
So how do you get to 0.35? So the rows are still as far apart as they always were.
So some people experiment at the same time, like Pascal Marchand in La Vougeray, it was 0.5 to 0.5. And they say me it's too difficult to work, too much work to do all by hand, and they stop it. For me, the old fashion in Burgundy, you have a regal for one generation, a regal to do the plantation. It's called Chez d'Arpenteur. That's my father make it, and he gave to me. And my grandfather was 0.9 to 1 meter. That more people do that in Burgundy. And my father doing a second one to 0.7. And for me, it was more easy to have the same and to put a new mark, to 0.
Okay.
In the middle.
So you've got your ruler that tells you the difference.
Yes.
And then, so you've got your ruler, which is 0.7, and you also
in the middle.
Right. So you now know how to.
Yes. And there was no logic. It was just organized and to more easy to work like this for me. And there was no regal in Burgundy. The regal was a minimum of 8,000 vine per hectare before you lose the
appellation.
Less appellation, but no maximum, because the people said it's not possible to be higher. And in the vintage about 2010, they take the old regal of 1936. They never change, and they said we have maybe to make new regal more modern. On the new regal, new rules is 0.5 to 0.5.
So no two vines can be closer together than 0.5 and half a meter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it means 40,000 vine by hectares is big. And they say no people will experiment more close. And then for me, the old plantation before this regal is 0.335, because I can do that. And if I have to replant, it will be 0.5. And after the new regal, I use 0.5 now for the new plantation in close plantation. And before in the old vine, between one vine, old vine, and another old vine, I plant a new baby in the middle.
So does that work? So if you've got established vines a meter apart with their root system, it is possible to plant one in the middle without a difficulty.
It's possible to plant, but you need 10 years to develop. A normal plantation without competition, in 3 years, 4 years, you can have some berries, and after 5-6 years, no more crops. And we said 10 years, 15 years, less stress. At the Haute Densite with some neighbors oldest, it's more long. The first crops after 8 years, on 10 years, small crops, but better and better, and in more time. And it's very hard to work because you have to do all by hand. There is no machine to cut the grass between, it's too short. And you have another view of in the Chez, we don't cut the top, we do tressage. On the tressage, the vineyard have less stress, and the vine can have more rootstock, develop more the rootstock. It's the same hormone when you cut the top, stop to grow on the vine, the rootstock stop to grow on the top, stop to grow in the same time. If you don't cut the top, it's better for the rootstock, but for the long term. And we have less entrecœur, smaller berries, more skin, less juice.
And entrecœur, I can't remember what it's called in English, but it's if you do hedge your vines, what happens is that a second generation shoot wants to start growing in the middle, French entrecœur. Are they called laterals, maybe, in Australia and New Zealand? And these are bad things because they give you second generations of grapes that get in the way, and they mean that the vine is putting more energy into things which are not necessary. Whereas obviously you want the vine to be looking after itself with its leaves, but you want it to put its love and care and energy into the grapes.
Yes.
Yes.
And something that was very important for me is that the story in Burgundy, before phylloxera, all Burgundy was planting. It's not new. And for me, not invite anything. It's only observation. On a new book, 1750 about is Abbé Mémoire de l'Abbé d'Ondonise. Speak about Burgundy. He comes from Vatican, go to Citeaux to observe why Burgundy makes the best wine in Clos. And he speak about the grapes, when to harvest, when to put in clean barrique. He speak about the fertilizer and everything. It was very simple, but very evident, and that bon sens paysan of Burgundy. But he speak about the quality of the grapes when the vines are oldest and are dead, and you have to replant because the quality is less good when you have less vine. And he said you have to have a more regular high density plantation to be better for the quality. And it's not new, it's old-fashioned. And just for me, it was very important to. It's not without rootstock. We use rootstocks, not plantation full, but it's the competition was one part for me, maybe important before. It was important to make come back to see if it's good or bad.
Right. Well, let's think about tasting. You've got 3 vineyards. We're playing a 4-5-4 formation today, of which the best known, because the biggest volume, is Derrieres, Chez Edouard, or behind Edward's place. And we've got 4 of those, then 5 of the Puligny Montrachet Tromblot, which in fact I very rarely see because it's a much smaller planting. And then we have 4 wines from the Creo Beta Montrachet. We'll come to that later. So, Olivier, just I hope do you have the first 4 wines in glasses in front of you?
Yeah.
Good. Well, taste away, and we'll talk a little bit about this particular vineyard. So, what the density of this one is particularly high, isn't it?
Yes, it's the first vineyard we have close plantation. It was a part of the hill is too steep. The people walked with a horse before, but it was difficult for the horse to climb. It was too steep, and they tried with the tractor, the vintage 60, and too dangerous with the tractor. Then the winemaker stopped to work in this vineyard. It was no more vineyard for 40 years. And I decided to plant it in 01, asked to the owner if I can plant. He said, oh, very dangerous. We have to do all by hand. And if I do all by hand, maybe I can use close plantation to experiment if it's a good way. And we start the close plantation with the Chez in 01 vintage. One part is planting to 0.7, one part is planting to 0.35. On the first vintage we bottling, it was 05, but we never sold the bottle. And after we make 1 barrique each vintage, and after some years it's 2 barrique, and now we have new vineyard, it's a little bit more, it's 2, 3, 4, 5 barriques, depending on the size of the barrique. We work with large barriques, and then sometimes the first vintage was 228 liters, and after 300 liters, 250, and sometimes you can use 600 liters.
I actually found at home a bottle of your 2005 with your handwriting on. You must have given me years and years ago. So last year I had the great pleasure of doing the comparison here with Olivier when of all the vintages between 2006 and 2019, he pulled out a bottle of the regular bottling and a bottle of the high density bottling, and it was absolutely fascinating to see the differences between the two. In most cases, the high density bottling was clearly the superior, but just every so often, the regular was just so lovely and in the right place that we liked it even more. We've put in each of the 3 vineyards, we put the tasting order as oldest to youngest, and then Olivier can tell us if at any point he made changes in his techniques during the period that we're talking about. We're not going to, it's early in the day here, we're not going to taste all the wines with you, but we've got a bottle of the 2014 here. And we'll also have a bottle of the 2016 Puligny. So you're all familiar with the vintages by now, but they're 4 good to very good white wine vintages, of which everybody's agreed about 2014 and 2017. Personally, I think 2015 is one of those years that because it was a great red vintage and because it was quite sunny and powerful, people have decided in advance that the white wines are not going to be as good. But I think it's going to behave like 2009 and just get better and better and better. And if you have any 2009s, I see there's going to be a Creo Beta Montrachet later. But in general, that's a vintage which is tasting quite beautifully now. And the other one which people favour a bit less is 2018 because it was an enormously high crop for most people, but a high crop for Olivier is a miserably low crop for anybody else. So there will be no dilution in that wine, I feel sure. Break off my first drink of the day. How often have you drunk a Saint-Aubin, which once you've got it in your mouth, it gives you quite that intensity behind? And I think what you said to me once is that this high density planting, it increases the sugar levels, which yes, maybe you don't need anymore, but it increases everything.
Yes, because the vine a little bit more stress, and the stress make less. La vigne crée un stress qui arrête de pousser plus tôt, donc elle fabrique du sucre. On a une maturité phénolique qui est plus aboutie pour moi, plus complexe.
Okay, so under this stress conditions, the vine gets to work earlier, pushes harder, so it delivers the sugar, but it also delivers greater phenolic maturity as well. And it concentrates acidity, and it concentrates the dry extract, which gives you more flavor.
And there is more rootstock inside in the soil. So there is more competition, and the rootstock is more deep by the. C'est un partage des éléments minéraux qui fait que la vigne va chercher plus d'éléments minéraux pour moins de raisins.
Okay, so the vine roots are going to dig down and look for more mineral elements, which are then being shared by fewer grapes. So that's why you get this much greater intensity. I'm looking at my notes from the tasting that we did together, and actually 14, 15, 17 and 18, in most cases, the high density planting was, in all cases, it was slightly superior, but there wasn't that much difference, except perhaps in 2018, where I made a bit more of a difference. And you know, if you follow my scores on the website, that I'm very sparing in my 5-star category, but in fact, the high density wines got 5 stars for me in 2014, 2017, and 2018, and was only just missed in 2015. But I think the 2014 high density, even though it's the oldest of your four, needs a long time
Yes,
more.
it's a low evolution on the need time. Better to decanting, maybe open the bottle 4 hours before.
Yes, and I think yours were opened about an hour ago, probably. When I tasted them together here with Olivier, the 2015 was the one that was actually the most ready to drink, I thought, and was already delicious, but perhaps not quite as much energy for the longer term. So in a second, when you've tasted them all, you can report back with how they're showing over there. And then 2017, okay. So you made a new planting of high density vines in 2015.
Yes. First we have a small 0.1 and now 0.7 on the new plantation, and sometimes it's a complantation. In the Chez, it's a 0.4 plantation and 0.3 complantation. When I was young, I was not sure it's a good way. Then I make 0.1 because it was not so big. I can experiment.
Yes.
And now I would like to continue. Then I plant because I need 10 years to put in the high density cuvée when the vineyards are young. The rootstock is not so well placed, and I put in the classic cuvée in 17. One part of the high density go to the classic cuvée.
Ok.
C'est jeune ligne d'eau densité, c'est la cuvée classique en fait.
Ok, right.
Donc 16 aussi, où il y a une partie, et même dans le Puligny classique, il y a une partie de haute densité, mais qui est plus jeune, qui n'est pas en place, qui a des fois des raisins, des fois qu'on n'a pas. Et on attend 10 ans. We wait 10 years before bottling the high density on the label.
So any fruit that came from the young vines, the high density, used to go back into the regular bottling, and only the older vines were kept for the high density version. I'm just looking through my notes, but let's ask you who's going to be the spokesman and tell me how they're showing.
I actually would say, Jasper, that I don't know what everybody else thinks, but I thought the way you described the wines earlier was pretty much spot on as far as I could see. I thought the 14 was an absolute classic. The 15 was just a bit softer, rounder, more floral. The 17 I thought had a delicious sort of crystalline quality to it. I thought that was really superb. And then the 18 is kind of a richer style, but it's still in balance. But I don't know what anybody else thinks.
Yeah, I'd echo that. The 14 I thought was just a beautiful. It seems really open, ready. Just really intense floral nose, and then it follows up in the mouth, very concentrated, I think, and it just really round, very long mouthfeel.
Yeah, I'm just savoring the 14 at the moment. Of course, it's growing in the glass and becoming the extraordinary intensity and high acidity is now folding into the fruit of the wine. I mean, if you have these at home, then be very sparing about how often you drink them, because I think all of them are only going to get better. That's the plan, the game plan, at any rate. The 18, when we tasted them last year, I found exceptionally young. I felt there was amazing potential to it. There's a fair amount of acidity to it, which is not true of everybody's 18s, because some of them can be a bit dilute. But it's a vintage which I'm finding in white is gaining in character and personality and interest as it gets older. It's interesting to see how Chardonnay can do that. And over past decades, years like 82 or 79 or 73, which were immensely high crops, have become completely beautiful with age. So I actually do have higher hopes of 18 than most of my colleagues do. Well, I'm sure it'll be too young today. I expect 17 should be showing very well. Anyone else for a view?
17 for me is just perfect. I love that racy acidity. Yeah, I love the 17.
Yeah. Good. Olivier, you haven't persuaded anybody else in Saint-Aubin to follow you in this. Do they think you're crazy?
I think they're crazy. It's not in Burgundy. You work for the children. You work on. If I planted, my father helped me to planting this vineyard. And I work when I plant a new vineyard now. I'm 50 years old, and in 10 years old, it's for the future. And in Burgundy, it's difficult to change the regard on the plantation when you have Montrachet, Chevalier, your father or grandfather plant the vineyard, and difficult to plant to change the density of plantation. Burgundy is very traditional, but for the work, but traditional only for 100 years ago. Before, a lot of people forget the close plantation. And in Burgundy, like in maybe a lot of countries, it's difficult to find people to work so hard, to have more work on less hills. It's not a very economic business for a company. I'm lucky, I have good customer, but people like the one, and it's a bit more expensive, but a lot of people think Saint-Aubin could be very, in French we say, rapport qualité-prix, good price for good quality. Saint-Aubin, it's not possible to make very expensive wine in Saint-Aubin. Now, the market changed, it's more possible, but 10 years ago, 20 years ago, people don't think it's possible to have very expensive Saint-Aubin. I see the price on the market in Hong Kong on France. It's a crazy price for Saint-Aubin for me. Usually, the people buy Saint-Aubin, they drink the Saint-Aubin, they don't have a Chevalier Montrachet in the label, and then it could be good wine. But as was for me, it's a surprise. But the market changed, and the people taste the wine now more the wine and less the label, and the more education. It's a bit new.
Mm. One thing to say also about this wine, that since the first vintage, tasting there 2014, Olivier now gives these wines 24 months of maturation before bottling. Because when you've got this extraordinary intensity of fruit and flavor and all the other constituent parts in your wine, it's really worthwhile letting it express itself for a longer period before bottling.
But about the plantation, not in Saint-Aubin, but some friend or some neighbors asked me some question, like Pierre Vincent at Domaine Le Fleuve. He planting maybe last year a new vineyard in Haute Densite in Burgundy to experiment. Domaine Le Fleuve, Mr. de Villes asked me some question and visit me to because he thinks it's a good idea, and some people observe at the moment.
Yeah, and there are all sorts of young producers who think Olivier is a hero, and he is very much their role model in the vineyards in particular. And the only frustrating things about how Olivier runs his domain is that during daylight hours, he's always out in the vineyard. So if I want to come and taste in the winter, it's sort of we turn up an hour after dark with snow falling around our ears and get absolutely frozen tasting his wines. Anyway, shall we move on to the next set of 5, which are Puligny, Montrachet, Les Tremblots. Do you still make 2 versions of this, or is it now all high density?
No, it's a two version. The 14 is the classic version, Vignes, put on the label, and the high density, it's a small part, it's 0.10 too. It's in the middle of the vineyard. It's not just in the middle. And one part was planting in O2, that's the one you test. And we have new plantation in O3, O4, O5, O6, O7, O10. But the new plantation is still in the classic cuvée. It will be it's 0.9 hectares in the total Puligny, and 0.1 is high density, and 0.8 is the classic. But in the classic, it's young vine density on the different age of vine.
So in these years we've got, how much would you make? One big barrel?
Between 200 to 350.
Okay.
It's not a large one, not 600. It's
in bottles.
Yes.
That, yeah.
C'est
Ok.
entre 228, 300, 350 suivant les millésimes. Normalement, c'est autour de 350. On a fait
Ok.
2016, c'est 228, je crois.
Okay. So just to clarify that, if you missed it, depending on the size of the vintage, it'll either be one standard barrel or a 350 litre barrel and a half. So you're drinking tonight in or this afternoon in Hong Kong. You're drinking a fair proportion of the crop. So in this series, we've got 3 of the same vintages, but just to challenge Olivier, we've got 2 much more complicated vintages mixed in, 13 and 16. Just at the moment, I'm tasting lots of 2021, so we're talking about 2016 at the same time because 16 and 21 were the 2 really bad frosted years, under which conditions you sometimes get 2 generations of grapes. A few of the first generation that survived the frost, and then the rest are second generation grapes. And 2013 was a year in which the weather having been all right for much of the harvest, suddenly at the weekend, 4th, 5th of October, it poured with rain, and all the people who hadn't picked their whites by that time found they'd turned to mush. But Olivier is an earlier picker, so you would have picked before the rain.
Yes, that's right.
And got the t-shirt. So we picked before the rain.
Yes, we started harvest in the 20th of September 13. It's early, but the close rotation on the low hills, on the small berries, on low vigor rootstock make a cycle to 95, 100 days. When it was running in 13 of the summer, some vine still to grow, make leaf, but don't make sugar. And people wait because the sugar was very low. But when you wait, you lose freshness, you lose energy, and you don't have the vine stop to make sugar, only make construction, and make construction of the sugar and construction of the green too, to the vegetal. On the 3rd of October, there was a storm, and after the water, the grape fall. And people harvest by machine in Mâcon or Chablis. The smaller harvest they make because all the grapes fall before the machine. It was a very, in 1 day, it was rots on the normal grapes. But when you harvest early, it's still fresh and a good balance and no rots in the grapes. Maybe the skin could be a little bit more fragile in this vintage, and the rots develop very quick. It was fragile by the weather, which too much water and il y a des petites fissures dans la peau qui fait que c'était un millésime. On a une petite note un peu botrytis.
Okay. So the skins were more fragile because of the growing season in general. There were big floods everywhere in the beginning of May, and it snowed at the end of May. And that's very unusual, and it's odd to see snow on trees with fully grown leaves and so on. And so the summer was very up and down. In our garden, none of the fruit trees had any fruit because it was too cold for the bees to fly in May. So the apple trees had nothing. And as a result, also in the vineyards, it meant that the grapes were a little bit more fragile, so they were therefore that bit more susceptible to rot. And if you picked early, you had slight underripe feeding, but you avoided the rot. If you picked too late, then you got the rot and the horrible.
Yes.
So I'm guessing that 2013 is probably going to be in a good place to drink now. The 2014 you have in a magnum, so you can drink more of it later, is the regular cuvee, but because it's old vines, it says Vignes, old vines on the bottle.
Something in 1930 or 1970.
And then 15, 16, 17 are all the high density cuvee. Does it say how many bottles?
No, maybe, but not sure.
Not sure.
Not this
right.
vintage. See.
Yeah.
580. 580.
Okay, more bottles than you think. So nearly 2 barrels made in 16. Yes. So you obviously escaped the frost.
Puligny could be a little bit more generous. And this vineyard, it's between depending on the vintage.
Yeah, up to 2 barrels. 13 was also the first year that Olivier used a technique which I think is incredibly important for white wines, and not many people do it, which is that you crush the grapes before you press them, which has the effect of a little bit of skin contact. I mean, we're only talking about a short period of time. We're not talking about trying to make a classic skin contact orange wine, but just you have an effect of the skins. And if you think how important the skins are in the red wines, why would you not want to have some skin effect in your white wines too? So I'm an absolute believer in it. So that was the innovation in 2013.
And for me, it's very important to have this structure. When I was young, I started with my father, and I would like my father use a machine to crusher, but it was very hard. And when you break the skin and break the stem, you give a green taste to the wine. And I would like to work without crusher to give more pureté, more freshness, more elegance. But my taste changed, and I think the crusher could help to have a good structure to the wine, to age well. But you need to be very careful with stem. And we have a machine you can change each vintage on each vineyard. Usually we use crusher less for fresh vintage and more for hot vintage. And the same with the terroir, with French, with Saint-Ouen village, with more cold. En Bourgogne Blanc, we use less crusher, or more crusher, or more ripe terroir like Remy or Puligny.
One other technical change started from 2016. All the wines were bottled using Diam closures. Prior to that, they were mostly cork. But for years, Olivier was doing experiments with screw tops, Diam, glass, maybe all sorts of different closures.
Yeah, too much experiment.
And there was a period when you could say, if you're an importer in one country, you could say what you wanted. And Norway and England liked screw caps. But in the end, it's just simpler to have one thing. And Diam was the one that won the battle.
And after we experiment too, at the same time, the problem with Premox in Burgundy, it's a big problem. And a lot of winemakers use more and more SO2 and to protect the wine, and the wine can travel on the edge maybe. And for me, it changed the taste of the wine. It's a bit more green, vegetal, and I don't like that. I'm very fragile in the stomach when the wine has too much sulfite. And then in the vintage 10, 11, 12, we would like to have less and less SO2. And the Diam helped me to control the SO2. You have no surprise with the natural crop, with the Diam. And the level of SO2 now is low. It's 2 times less than we used 15 years ago. And the Diam help. And the SO2 we use change a little bit too. Now we make the own SO2 with natural sulfur, and it change the taste to the wine.
It's what they call rock.
It's a new
sulfur.
vintage. Yes. It's a soup de mine by all volcanic, and it change the taste too.
And the other thing which is changing with the sophisticated people, including obviously Olivier, is that in the past you'd say, after this particular processing that we've done, whether it's vinification or maybe the malolactic fermentation or a racking, we would systematically add some sulfur after each of these stages. Now you do by analyzing each particular barrel and saying, okay, this one needs a bit, but that one doesn't. So you end up only putting the sulfur in when there is a clear need for it, as opposed to just putting it in automatically to make sure nothing would ever go wrong.
I think SO2 is like a medicine. You can use it, but not each barrique, not each time. And like Jasper said, it's you analyze, but not analyze by just taste. By tasting some wine, sometimes 1 barrique by years, I use SO2, only 1 barrique for the first year, but usually I wait racking or bottling to put SO2. And the SO2 total is 50 in total at finish. It's why my father used it before the vintage 95. It's not very high, and you can have a good free on total. And the wine is more complex, more digest with less SO2.
So the balance might be 50 total and 20.
20-25.
25,
The usual is 1/3, 2/3, but as I said, it's a good surprise. It's half. It's 25 because I don't use any SO2 at first. Then you have more free than usual.
Yes. Okay. And the rules for normal bottling of white wine, you're allowed what, 140, something like that?
It's between the rule. It's about natural coke 40 in free. If you need 40 in free, 2/3 to be 120 in total.
Yes.
But some people are very frightened about the Premox. When you throw one in Hong Kong or another country, they use 45, 50. This means 150 in total and 15 in free.
And then you really can taste the sulfur,
yes,
and it catches in your throat, makes you cough, and blocks up your nose as well, and makes you snore at night. So you're not popular when you get home. Just before we ask for your comments, a little bit about the Tromblot vineyard. Where is it situated within Puligny?
It's situated just in the corner of the Enseignères, Batard, Montrachet, and Hubert. Hubert from Chassagne, Enseignères from Puligny. And in this part, it's flat. It's more clay in the beginning of the soil, 20 centimeters, and there is white marl at the after. And the white marl give good energy, good. It's more mineral than the classic Puligny. The Puligny from Merseyside is more ripe, more sweet, more round. The Puligny from this part is more energy. And my father buys this vineyard in vintage 33. He was 20 years old when he buys the vineyard, and it was 1/3 in reds because the white was so difficult to sold. 1/3 in reds, 1/3 in white, and 1/3 in grass for the rabbit and the horse, because it was no value for this land at this time, and it's not very long. It's not. He's 50 years old. And this vineyard is every time the Haute Densite help the good maturation. There is student at the house, at the estate, make an experiment with the stress hydric and the stress azote, nitrogen.
So the hydric stress and also stress from nitrogen. Yeah.
With the classic cuvée on the Haute Densite, and this is the more difference in Tromblot. The Haute Densite help to make the stress. In Saint-Aubin Derrieres, you have the stress by the Haute Densite, but you have the stress by the terroir, because the really drained terroir make a stress natural. But the high density in the Puligny village help to make a more complex wine by the stress by the high density. You understand?
Yes. So over to you, whoever wishes to be spokesman, and say what you think about either one or several of the Pulignys. Who'd like to speak?
I'm just tasting the 16 again, which is the nose is just amazing on that. It's got a little bit of reduction, but I really love that nose. I think it's really sexy. It's quite actually a punchy wine. The 13 to me was quite round, and really it's drinking nicely right now. The 15 also quite intense, long and balanced, and also very drinkable right now. The 17 is really nice, but also very young. I think this has a long way to go.
Saving the best for last?
17.
14 mag.
Yeah, the 14 mag. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
incredible.
So the 14 has the advantage of the vintage, the advantage being a magnum, the advantage being old vines, but is not high density. But I mean, more and more, I'm finding 14 to be the absolute standout vintage of the last 10 plus years, if not 20 years. The 17s have just this year gone through a slightly adolescent phase when they're not quite as enjoyable as they were maybe last year, but they will be again. It's just one of those little trigger moments when they move on a stage in their development. Some of them seem a little evolved, but not in a bad way, not in a Premox way, but I think they will settle down again. But it sounds as though you've got a good 17 there, looking to the future. So if you are only allowed to drink one vineyard, are you going to drink the Saint-Aubin Derrieres Chez Edouard, or are you going to drink the Puligny Montrachet Tromblot?
Do you make magnums of the Chez Edouard?
Jeroboam. Yeah. Ignoring the size of the bottle. Does either of the, I mean, maybe not, maybe it's different wines, different occasions.
I mean, Saint-Aubin, I mean, it's such a great value. You know, whenever you see Lamy, Saint-Aubin on a wine list or anywhere really, and you know, it's just the consistency in what we've tasted so far is really impressive, I think.
I would say some vintages are better than, like, you know, a little bit of step up, but the baseline for all of them is very consistent. It's very good. Like there isn't one that's like, you know, really like bad at all. So I think the baseline is very high.
And from the sound of it, it could be either or both. Yes. As a friend, American friend of mine says, what's all this about when you suggest, shall we have either this wine or that? He says, what's this with either or? There's a perfectly good word called both. Okay.
I think, Jasper, just one comment on, I mean, just to say that the style of the 14 Puligny is totally different from the others. I mean, it's like chalk and cheese. I mean, almost literally, because you've got the more minerally styled of the Haute Densite, and then you've got the sort of petrol-y, sort of rounder, very concentrated style of the regular Puligny in 14. It's quite an interesting comparison, actually.
Good. I mean, because I'd hoped, but it didn't work out because only the Haute Densite seemed to be available on the Chez Edouard. But I slightly hoped that we were going to have the option of comparing in the same vintage a regular with a high density. Someone's insisting on joining us on the Zoom, but well, let's wait for that. Pause for that. It is fascinating, though, when you do see the reality of something which is an interesting theory, and you try it out, and then you actually can see it proved in the glass. You did a tasting here once with a few people, and you got them round, and you asked, and you gave them blind.
Yes.
Both. And how conclusive was that? How good were the tasters? Could they tell them apart?
About Derrieres and Puligny?
No, between Haute Densite and regular.
At first, some people have less education, prefer the more fruit, more. Now there is more texture in the high density every time. On the texture, it's another taste. Maybe you need education about that. And the more classic cuvées, more classic for Chardonnay, more fruit, more easy to drink with friends who don't know wine. The high density need people more taste, more education, more and special wine for special people, maybe. And it's better with food. The high density every time is better with food. If you make blend testing, the classic cuvée show well, but when you eat, the Haute Densite is great, depending on the people, on the fruit, maybe.
Yeah. If I were a winemaker and had to do a back label, I would just put 3 words on the back label, which are good with food. All right. So now, an exceptionally rare wine, which just a tiny holding of Creo Beta Montrachet. Almost everybody's holding in Creo Beta Montrachet is tiny. This isn't the vineyard that you own. You have a farming contract.
I rent, my father and grandfather rent this vineyard since the vintage 1950. And I buy the vineyard, I think in 17.
So you bought it now?
Yes, I bought it. So it was a big challenge for me because it was very expensive, and the owner want to sold the price so expensive. Some neighbors want to buy,
yes,
and they want to put me out. But I have in France there is some regular you can.
The rules that protect you as the sitting tenant.
Yes,
you have protection.
I buy it. Actually,
right.
well, it's for the children. not for me. And in Burgundy, if I don't buy this parcel, I will never maybe produce Grand Cru. It's difficult to buy a vineyard, difficult to rent, and then it's a very tiny parcel. But I like the balance. It's nice, nice grapes. Now, at first, when I was young, I think the grapes was a little bit bigger for Grand Cru. On the Sélection Massal my father used was a little bit too big, and then we decided to select the biggest grapes and to put out this vine, to use a new vine with smaller berries. And after 5 years, I think maybe not a good idea because you have young vine, and maybe it's better to put a new vine in the middle to have close protection, but to have better to améliorer la sélection massale en mettant au milieu des nouvelles sélections massales plus qualitatives.
Right. So not very happy with the plant material of the original planting, but rather than ripping it out and replanting completely, which would then mean very young vines, he decided in between each two of the old plants, he would put in one new plant of a much higher quality plant material with small berries.
And I start to do that in O2, half about the vineyard, and O3, O4, O5, the other half. And they need 10 years to develop. Then the 09, 012, it was planting in Haute Densite, but we don't put on the label because it was young vine in the middle of the old vine. And after we put Haute Densite 13 vintage maybe.
Yeah. And so clearly there is only one vine in each.
Yes, only one barrique, 220 liters, only one cuvée, no other cuvée because a small, only 1% of 0.05 liter. It means 950 vine maybe about it.
950, so a big yield would be half a bottle per vine, but you then be less than that. So a barrel, a 350 barrel would probably be what you make in a good year?
No, it's between 200 to 230. The big vintage, on fait 230, des fois 240. On a des petits fûts de 10 litres à côté, 20 litres pour le soutirage, pour compléter.
So the biggest yield he's made is one 228 litre barrel with a few litres sitting in a bottle alongside, used for topping up and the rest of it.
22, it's only 228, but in 21 we produced more. It was 238.
Okay. So you stayed in wood. You don't have any other form of container?
Yes, but for the new vintage, you go one years in barrique, 230, and second years in wine glass.
In a wine globe.
But it's for 20 vintage on the 19. Yeah. 20 vintage first. 20 vintage.
Right, so we got 2009, which I mentioned before as being an absolute favorite of mine, as long as you picked at the right time. 2012, which is a vintage which was quite hailed in the Côte de Beaune, not in the Côte de Nuit. There's a very small crop everywhere because the flowering wasn't very successful. But it's a wine, it's a vintage I've always liked because there's sort of an electric tension in a lot of 2012s. And then 14 and 16 we've already discussed. So taste away. And in a minute, let us know what you think. If you're not so familiar with Creo Beta Montrachet, and you may not be because very few wines on the market, if you imagine that below Montrachet you've got Batard Montrachet and Bienvenue Batard up at the Puligny end, Batard then comes to an end. At the Puligny side, there is a big drop down into the Batard Montrachet vineyard compared to Le Montrachet. By the time you get to the Chez Montrachet end, they're almost on the same level. The fault is much less evident. And then you come to the end of Batard, which has been reasonably even at this point. So it's a gentle slope going down the hill, a small gradient. Now the slope drops away to the south. So instead, the rows are typically planted from up the hill, which is now at the north, down to the south. And this vineyard is called Creo Beta Montrachet, just south of Batard. And there's a nice vineyard called Chez Montrachet Blanchot Dessus, which is just below Montrachet on the other side. They actually, at the time, wanted that promoted to become Blanchot Batard Montrachet, but it was not allowed. But Creo, you want to be as close as you can to Batard because there you've got a nice bit of slope facing south. At the end of the vineyard, you are beginning to flatten out, almost in a slight dip. So you are you're a little bit closer to Batard, but also further.
Just the border of the Batard.
Yeah.
On the top, because usually the long line people have vine to the into the top. Mine is the top, l'Ovney is the beginning of the line.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Nous, on est plus au-dessus, on a une partie. Et Criots, it means Chez. On Chez in Burgundy, it's limestone. On the Creo is more chalk than Bienvenue. Bienvenue, you have a dark brown on the soils, but less chalk. On Creo, more chalk.
So it's not as dense and deep and powerful a wine as a Batard Montrachet, but sometimes with a little bit more nuance, a little bit more elegance, with all the little white stones.
For me, the Creo, before the high density production, it was elegant, floral, but it have less weight than the Batard. With the Haute Densite, he helped me to have more mineral, more weight, more structure. It's another wine for Creo now with the high density. It's more complex, more long, and it changed the density of the wine.
So, 9, 12, 14, and 16. But just a reminder, as we said earlier, in fact, all of them are made with the high density planting. It's just in 9 and 12, it was felt that the new plants were too young to have made much difference, so they didn't get high density on the label. Haute Densite.
The 9 got this incredible sort of smoked meat nose. It's I don't know. It's very unusual for me to smell that, but is that something?
Okay. Which vintage?
9.
Oh, 9.
The problem it's one small barrique on the sometimes en français le côté vu qu'un petit fût ça fait un côté un peu plus boisé ou le côté par rapport aux autres barriques on est sur des 300 350 600 là on est sur des 300 souvent et là sur un petit fût ça sent un petit peu le bois du
a small barrel which has probably got more of a sort of barrel taste which when it is also in a slightly reductive condition will give you that smoky element is Olivier's guess as what's happened because the Creo is in a smaller barrel than the Derrieres Chez, for example.
On that, at first in the vintage 09 or before, I can use barrique a little bit youngest, like 3 years old, 2 years old for the Creo. But now I use barrique 10 years old. It changed a lot with the wine globe for the second years on the old barrique. For me, it's better than more recent, more young barrique for 1 year. But maybe 09, maybe 012, it's the youngest barrique, like 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old.
Okay.
And we have a special barrique because only one barrique. We ask François Frère to make a special barrique for you. Good oak on the 4 years old séchage, but sometimes the oaks it's difficult to integrate for me. I don't like the new oak for disculate. It's every time I prefer the old barrique.
Okay. But the special one made by François Frère with 4 years of air drying. So the 9 has got a slightly funky nose. How about the 12?
Clean, very clean.
Yeah.
It's not a vintage. It's not a question whether it has a good reputation or a less good reputation. It's just nobody talks about 12. I mean, partly because it was a really very small crop. But as I say, it's recently we did the 10-year-on tasting at my neighbor Becky's house, which obviously we lost during the worst of the COVID years, so we couldn't do the 2010 or 2011 vintage, but we did do 2012s, and it was really interesting to see some of the minor appellations, sort of Côte Chalonnaise or generic wines, were looking a bit tired. But once you got into the better vineyards of the Côte d'Or, they showed really, really well. So it's a vintage I would be inclined to look out for if you see some around. in fine restaurants in Hong Kong, such as where you are today.
I tasted those wine 6 months ago, or 9, 12, 14, 13, 16. I tasted them in New York for the Pollet. Some customer bring a vertical of Creo Beta. And for me, 12, it's not a great vintage, but the Criots show very well in the blend testing. It was a good surprise, and maybe it's a better surprise for this vintage, because difficult vintage for me, sometimes the fruit maturation go quicker, and but it showed well for the vintage. It was a good surprise for me, 12.
Good. And then our friend 14, I imagine, is very young, but should be utterly sensational. And 16, maybe we tasted the Puligny 16, and it was actually quite saline at the finish. You had a reasonable richness of fruit, and then you had this tension, salty tension behind. So how are the 14 and the how are the 14 and the 16 tasting with you?
I think 14 continues to deliver. This is stunning. Very balanced. Again, high acidity, but then the texture is also very dry extract. It's quite thick at the same time. Yeah, sensational. 14.
And miles to go. I mean, even the Derrieres Chez Edouard had miles to go for the Creo, even more so. And the 16, how's that showing?
Feels a bit riper, rounder in some ways. Not as intense as the 14.
Did you get frosted vineyard 16?
No, because every time it's a very tiny vineyard, and I like to do pruning myself. I do pruning every time in April, May, very late. Maybe I am the latest winemaker to do pruning in Burgundy. And I have no frost in 16, 17, 21 in Creo Beta. The late pruning helped me to have a long maturation. You can harvest a bit later too. And the late pruning helps to have no frost.
Good.
Actually, I think the 12 is, for me, drinking the best right now. Yeah, it's just really, it's just so balanced compared to the others. I mean, they're all good, but I think the 12 is just perfect.
So what I would suggest is, with the 09, it'll be interesting to see over the next, however much longer you're going to spend this afternoon there, it'll be interesting to see if that sort of smoky, funky bouquet blows away and you get something that's much cleaner wine underneath. Or if you have a spare glass, try just racking it backwards and forwards between 2 glasses to see if that cleans up the nose. Now, question time. Do you have any particular questions? There's one question we always ask our vigneron guests, but we'll wait for that one. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask Olivier about any of these wines, about something he does, something he might want to do in the vineyards?
Can I ask you a question about your stylistically? Your wines have this really intense acidity to them, but a nice balanced acidity, and I think that's kind of a signature of your wines is the acidity. What is it that is making your wines so balanced with this, but also has this nice laser-like acidity to it?
En français, c'est pourquoi
comment tu arrives à faire des vins qui sont si équilibrés, mais avec une belle acidité?
I think the grapes need the vine, the work in the vineyard help to have this balance. If the vineyard have good balance, less stress, the grapes is better. I try to have a good selection massal, good rootstock. When you use pruning, it's a special pruning to have less stress to the vineyard. You have if the vine has less stress, the grapes is better for me. And after, when you harvest, we try to harvest in the ripe, low hills, make good maturation, and you can have good energy in the fruit. Sometimes a lot of people prefer big hills, but after you have to wait to have good maturation. The low hills make good sugar with good acidity, and after you can use all the leaves, no débourbage. The leaf gives to the wine the structure. You can use a crusher. If you have good grapes, you can use a crusher. If the grape is not ripe, the crusher will be bad. But good balance in the grapes, we can have a crusher, more leaves. And I'm lucky, we have a very nice cellar, cold cellar. And the cold cellar helped me to make a long élevage with less yolk and less sulfite. And all the combination of each make a good balance. The long élevage of 2 years on the lees, we have better acidity after 2 years than 1 year. It's difficult to explain that in by chemistry, but there is des éléments du potassium du vin qui repartent du tartre et du vin, qui redonnent des pH plus bas. On a des pH plus bas après Malo, alors qu'avant Malo. C'est bizarre à expliquer, mais c'est l'élevage long apporte plus de fraîcheur et d'acidité.
Yeah, so an element of potassium deposits out, and he ends up with a long élevage having a lower pH, therefore a slightly higher acid wine than he would do with a shorter élevage. But I mean, some people may not be happy with the level of acidity in Olivier's wines, but I love acidity in wine. I think
I love it
fresh
too.
and energetic.
It's ultimate wine. I was just saying, if you like that style, that acidity style, then it's fantastic. But I agree, it's not for everybody.
Yeah,
I think it's not really acidity. The acidity in Burgundy, we like to harvest at pH of 3.2. On 3.2 is normal acidity. Sometimes in Champagne it's 3.00, or in Chenin it's 3.00. The acidity is not very important. The more important is the energy of the fruit. And the energy give the life. And you have good life in the wine, good energy, it's vibrant, and you have an electric taste, like you taste des piles 9 volts, comment on dit ça, une pile, c'est
a battery.
A battery, when you taste a battery when you are a little boy.
Oh yeah, I remember doing that.
Yes, it's like it on the mouse. And you have the palate on the mouse, very tactile. And for me, the people in Saint-Aubin have no money to use fertilizer, and less fertilizer in the vineyard, the roots go more in the soil, and you have more the taste of the Saint-Aubin and more energy. Sometimes the big problem with agriculture modern is people with money use fertilizer, and you lose, you make more fruit, but more wine of fruit and less texture.
I have 2 questions more for you, Olivier. The first is, could you imagine doing the high density planting with your Pinot Noir grapes?
I would like to do that with Pinot Noir because it's maybe more important in Pinot, and I use that in 2 vineyards, new vineyard. It's Chassagne Premier Cru Chaumet, but it's white, and Centenay Premier Cru Clos des Gravières in red. But I don't put on the label high density at the moment because it's while planting in 13 and 14 vintage, and then maybe in 2-3 years it will be more complex, and I can put high density in the Centenay Gravière. I buy the vineyard in 12 vintage Gravière. Thank you, Jasper, because Jasper showed me a good wine in London, and it was Centenay Clos des Gravières. And 1 year after that, when people said you can buy 1 vineyard in Centenay, it's in the Clos des Gravières. Okay, I tasted the one 64 with Jasper, and it was great. And
this was at Berry Brothers, and therefore the current drinking vintage was deemed to be 1964. But we raided Simon Berry's private cellar and found that bottle.
And I can buy 1 vineyard in Centenay Clos des Gravières. 1 part was red, 1 part white. And the owner, it was Vincent Girardin, said me, "Oh, Olivier, you have to replant all in white. The red is only by tradition. It's a very nice parcel for white. But I like the red, the Pinot Noir. Then when I buy the vineyard, 1 year after, I plant new completation, new vine in the middle. When we make blend testing at first, the first vintage 12, the customer don't know I buy this vineyard. And we make blend testing, and they said, "Oh, it's like Tromblot Premier Cru, Volnay Premier Cru Cailleret. It's very elegant wine." And I say, "Oh, it's a Volnay Premier Cru. I'm happy. It's I keep the wine. I don't want to replant white in this vineyard." Then I decide to complant Pinot Noir to why if I just in this terroir show better. And then you will see in the future, in 5 years, 3 years, I don't know, Haute Densite, Pinot Noir, Le Centenaire Clos du Gravière.
Looking forward to that. Now that actually introduces the other question, because when you had the chance to buy any one of a range of vineyards from Vincent Giraudin, you said, I want the Clos du Gravière. If you could buy, or somebody could give you one other vineyard, maybe we'll say you're not allowed Montrachet because that's too obvious. But
maybe Montrachet, or
yeah, but what other vineyard?
I have a good education in the wine by my father, maybe, and by my friend too. And a lot of friends come from Volnay, and I think Volnay is a great village with a great winemaker, like Lafarge, like Thomas Boulet, like Vignes, like La Pousse d'Or. And for me, I learned a lot by the winemaker. It's they help me to make wine for red on white. It's a tradition, old-fashioned old winemaker in Volnay. And for me, my taste, the Volnay from La Pousse d'Or 1990, it's a great wine. Charapotel was a great winemaker for me and good example. And I was good friend with Nicolas Potel. I'm lucky to still have some old Pousse d'Or in my cellar. And it was modern winemaker for the vintage. And now for me, it's an example. It's what I would like to make for now.
So you'd like to have some Volnay Carré?
Volnay Carré, Clos de la Pousse d'Or. Clos des Centaurés, for me, is one of the best Grand Cru with a Centenaire du Milieu, maybe, in Côte de Beaune.
Wonderful. So we're probably coming towards the end of our time. Does anybody have a last question? If not, we will leave you in peace to finish off the bottles, including that magnum. And we will see you again.
One question. Olivier, like for these wines, like they are more built for the longer run. Like, so how would you suggest, like for the customer or yourself, that how long should we hold the wines for before you would enjoy it, or you would recommend your customers to enjoy the wines?
For which wine, in general, or for each?
Say that for the Haute Densite ones, like the Puligny or the Saint-Aubin, Criots.
For Haute Densite, I don't drink a lot of Haute Densite. It's more, I see the customer drink them on the sometimes don't open one bottle 1 week. It's 1 by years maybe. On the last time we taste some Haute vintage and it show very well. Maybe it's good. For me, it's a good surprise. The one show very well when it's aged. The evolution goes slowly. I like the one between 5 to 10 years old. But the Haute Densite, 07, 08, 09, we taste with Jasper show well. Now the one is a bit more complex, maybe in the new vintage, but you have to see when it's aged. It will be, I hope, so good.
I'd like to say that at least 10 years.
Yes, 10 years is a good balance. Yeah. Maybe more. Maybe with the diam, it's no bad surprise with the cork. With every time in Burgundy, when I like the old wine, but in Burgundy you can have the great bottle, and second bottle could be a little bit less good by the cork. With the diam, it's more regular for me. I hope with the diam in 10 years you have a good taste with the wine. But I experienced diam since 07 vintage with some Bourgogne Blanc, Français, and now it show very well. And I'm sure the 18 or 17 taste in 10 years show very good too. Well, but
so the best time to drink them is when Olivier is there, or failing that, when I'm there.
And when it's very young, like the 17, 18, it's good to decant. If you decant the wine, put in carafe, it's good. It's better too.
Jasper, could I make one comment or pass on one comment apropos your question about which vineyard would Olivier like to have if he could? So I remember Becky Wasserman saying to me once, if there's one grower in Burgundy that I really wish had more of the top quality vineyards, it's Olivier Lamy, which I thought was quite a compliment.
Thank you.
Well done, Olivier, and well done, Becky. But yes, there are times the contrary of that, the reverse of the medal, is there are 1 or 2 times you go and taste with somebody and you rather wish that they didn't have so many top vineyards because they would be better used elsewhere. But alas, we don't have the power to make those changes. Well, that's wonderful. We'll be having some more white wine Zooms coming up. in the next month or so. And I look forward to seeing you all again. And what a privilege to have been able to spend some time today with Olivier. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation for the wine and the enthusiast.
We'll leave you to enjoy the rest of the bottles, but see you all again soon. Bye-bye.